In the last couple days, I've been thinking about and working on this video regarding Gabby's last text to her mom, the one that says, "No service in Yosemite." This text was sent on August 30th from Gabby's phone. And in recent news, the FBI announced they found a body that is the same description as Gabby Petito. We are awaiting on the autopsy results to confirm it's 100% Gabby. But the FBI did announce it. They said it's most likely Gabby, and they had sent their condolences already to her family. Also, the FBI are asking if anyone was in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area where Gabby was found between August 27th and the 30th to check their videos and, give them any information. And on the 1st is when Brian Laundrie arrived back in Florida without Gabby and had her van. Clearly, Gabby wasn't in Yosemite. Now, it's an odd text, and Gabby's parents thought it was odd too. Gabby's mom said she didn't believe it was from Gabby. She also said, looking back now and looking at all the facts, she believes it's not her daughter. In an interview on Nancy Grace, Gabby's mom, Nicole, talked about how, looking back, it was uncharacteristic and would have been longer and more personable, she said. And Gabby's dad, Joe Petito, said about the text, "To be honest, that wasn't a statement. That was 4 lines of crap, but what do I know?" Now, with the new information of Gabby being found, this text gets even more strange, doesn't it? Especially she's found in Wyoming. And the oddities right off the bat is the location. Yosemite is in California, and even though on body cam we did see Brian talk about California and eventually they would head there, but it wasn't in their plans for quite some time. And that definitely wasn't the plan at all for that week. They were headed to Yellowstone, and according to Gabby's friend, she said that she was to meet up with Gabby on the 29th in the Yellowstone area, but Gabby didn't show up, and she didn't communicate with her friend that she wasn't going to show up. So I wondered initially, and remember, I started this video before we found out about Gabby, but I was wondering if that was a mistake in the text, thinking maybe it was meant to say Yellowstone, but accidentally said Yosemite. But for Gabby and Brian, who planned this trip, you'd think that they were very familiar with the word Yellowstone. And even Gabby's mom said she had an itinerary of their trip. So it is doubtful, in my opinion, that it would be this type of error. My next thought was maybe she was in a hurry and meant to say Yellowstone, but it just came out Yosemite. Again, I wasn't so sure. I think it's doubtful. And of course, with this new news about Gabby being found, it changes that theory, right? And I also thought about, predictive text. No, not that either. So another question I had was that an SOS text? Maybe Gabby's mom would have seen that text and know that something was wrong because it was weird, but Nicole didn't. What she did say, though, was it was uncharacteristic looking back. And we saw in a different case, I'm covering Justin Evans, and there was a text from his phone as well that was uncharacteristic. And you can see that playlist in the description box below, and I will also put that phone video so you can check that out. Then I wondered, well, maybe a stranger texted it. I mean, it's possible. I doubt it. It's possible, and it's not impossible. And then I asked myself, did Brian text it? Which is very, very possible. He had taken Gabby's phone before. We know that, right? And he'd be the closest person one would look at if Gabby didn't have her phone. It just makes sense. And now with this new news and Gabby's timeline of the 29th when she was supposed to meet with her friend, but this text came on the 30th, then the question is, who texted on the 30th, right? And then I asked myself, why? Why that specific phrase? No service in Yosemite. It's a big question, why that? Whoever texted that phrase was intentional about it. They chose those words. And why choose those words? No service in Yosemite. Especially when you're not there in Yosemite. And that's not on the itinerary. And if Brian had the phone, then he knew that's not the plan either. Some may say, well, maybe that's a diversion. However, I don't believe that's the case. And Yosemite is a 15-hour drive away from Yellowstone and 14 hours away from the Grand Tetons, which is the last known place that Gabby told her mom on FaceTime where they were at. And in recent news, as I mentioned, we know that Gabby's body was found at the Spread Creek Dispersed Campground in Wyoming. So 14 hours from Yosemite. So if we think about it, it wouldn't make any sense for Gabby to send this text. And now that we know where she was found, it definitely doesn't make any sense. So I'm obviously taking a look at Brian. And I got to thinking. I thought about books that Gabby and Brian were reading. The Zodiac, which is about a serial killer who sent letters to the authorities, and they were written in ciphers. They read a book called Fight Club, which we know that was a movie, and we know that Brian was very, very interested in this author. And they also read a book called Rant, which is about killing, same author as Fight Club, and another book called Lullaby, which is a serial killer book, same author as Fight Club, and a couple of other books. Now, some of the locations they went to, which is very interesting, since some of them coincide with places of true crimes. I noticed that in the beginning when I was mapping things out. We saw the sand dunes where Chris Watts was with Nicole, and we saw a visit to Colorado Springs, and it just caught my attention earlier on. I was curious if that's maybe where they were visiting, but I do know they were visiting all the national parks. Then I found out about these true crime books, and even Gabby mentioned back in January that she was interested or obsessed with a type of murder podcast before this trip. Now back to Brian and his fascination with Fight Club. He has pictures that were drawn on Instagram, and on his post he says, "Only after disaster can we be resurrected. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. Nothing is static. Everything is evolving. Everything is falling apart." And that's taken right from the Fight Club movie and book. Now in another post he put, "The things you used to own, now they own you." Now he made mention in one of those posts about the word static. And it's interesting to me that their YouTube channel's called Nomadic Static. And they also read true crime books on their trip, and they showed pictures throughout their Instagram. Also, there's a reference to the Lullaby book that is it talks about a culling song in there, and it's more death to read about. And one of the words in there, also in that song, had the word static. So it's interesting. Now back to the body cam footage. We saw Gabby and Brian struggled in their relationship, and clearly they had an altercation that day on the body cam, August 12th. And Gabby said that she felt Brian didn't support her in what she wanted to do or things that she can do, like her blog. And in my own personal opinion, Brian seemed a little too jovial that day. He did say a few interesting things, and I did mention this before. At one part in the body cam, he had asked something to the effect of, "I hope she's not saying too many bad things about me." So I found that interesting. I found it also interesting that he joked and called her crazy in front of the police, so that was interesting as well. There's a couple little things. Maybe I'll do another video on it. They fought all day, and he's a little too happy, my opinion. Now, he was also known to take away Gabby's keys and her phone and lock her out of the van, all kinds of things. Let's just talk about Fight Club for a minute, because there's one scene in the movie. It has to do in a phone booth, and in one of the scenes, the main character's at the phone booth, and he goes to make a call to Tyler Durden, who ends up being his alter ego. And one of the known parts of the movie is he makes a phone call, but it's obviously not possible to call someone because it's not another person, and you can't get a call back. But in the movie, the phone rings, and in small print on the payphone, it says no incoming calls allowed. So the call comes in, and he talks to his self, basically. But I thought about the phone call and no service and no incoming calls allowed, which brings me back again to the words no service. And I thought about the books as well. You know, the Zodiac book, it used ciphers, but this text isn't a cipher. It's odd, but not a cipher. Then I thought maybe it's an anagram. No. Then I came across this, and it's something that just piques my interest. I thought to myself, what does Yosemite mean? And so I looked it up. And this is where it had me concerned. It's something to take in account, and it could be something, it could be absolutely nothing. But if this text is intentional or was intentional, which I believe it was, then this is something to look at. And when I looked this up, it was before Gabby was found. Now that she's found, it makes me even more, it catches my attention. So when I look up Yosemite, it says, what does Yosemite mean in slang? It's also in the Urban Dictionary. And it says, Yosemite means literally those who kill. The Yosemite people were referred to as killers by these surrounding tribes who feared them. And in another spot, I read, the name Yosemite, meaning killer in Miwok, originally referred to the name of a tribe which was driven out of the area and possibly annihilated by the Mariposa Battalion. So that catches my attention. And there was an article also, and maybe I'll put that in the description box below. It talked about Yosemite and how people thought it meant grizzly, but there was some sort of mistake the way they spelt it. So it's just very interesting. I'll put that in the description box so you can read it. So then I asked myself, the person who was texting and said no service in Yosemite, did they pull a Chad Daybell? Meaning, Chad sent a text to his wife saying he burned limb debris by the fire, shot a raccoon, and is now buried in the pet cemetery. And Tylee Ryan, who was 16 years old at the time and spent her last day at Yellowstone Park, was found charred, dismembered, and buried in Chad's yard in the pet cemetery. The same day that text happened. He had the urge to send that text and a tell, you could say. So I wonder if this could be the same, meaning, was that the intention of Brian if he had the phone? No service because the line is dead, and Yosemite because she was killed. And we found out Gabby's body was in Wyoming. We're still waiting on that autopsy to 100% confirm, but FBI believe it's her. But based on this text, I'm thinking it was murder because there has been questions about other options, an accident, etc. Also about Yosemite, which is another interesting fact. It's a place where there was a serial killer, and his name was Cary Stayner. He killed several women in the area. They went missing, and then they ended up being found dead and killed. And perhaps Brian knew this about Yosemite, especially because both of them were into true crime. And this last text was text to tell what happened, like Chad Daybell, without a confession, but in essence, still a confession. No service in Yosemite. It's not a text, it's a tagline. Kind of like, that's all folks, lights out, you know what I mean. And one more thing about Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The third rule of Fight Club, someone yells stop, goes limp, taps out, the fight is over. Fourth rule, only 2 guys do a fight. Fifth rule, 1 fight at a time. Sixth rule, no shirts, no shoes. Seventh rule, fights will go on as long as they have to. And eighth and final rule, if this is the first night of Fight Club, you have to fight. Let me know your thoughts below. Do you think it's possible? It's a tagline, not a text. Let me know your thoughts. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please share this video out. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.